Okay, it's interesting when you look around and you talk to the researchers and everything else, and at how hard people are working to try and come up with new innovation. I've worked in this space for just on 20 years. In fact, the very first work that I did on this was spent 2 years, 1998 to 2000, trying to get the government to fund crown-of-thorns as a environmental emergency to protect the coral. Didn't succeed with that argument, but when I turned around and changed the argument to looking after the actual economic assets and made it all about the economy and the marine tourism industry, I started to get some traction. And then I added to that the idea of doing it as bushfire control. We couldn't deal with crown-of-thorns on a industry or a reef-wide basis, but what we could do is protect the important tourism sites to ensure we still had an industry worth $6 billion employing over 60,000 people. And that argument got traction, and in 2000 we got the first funding for the crown-of-thorns program, and we worked through that with AIMS and GBRMPA, and then ultimately continued through from 2000 to about 2007, and we ran through the whole process. During those last 20 years, we've developed some pretty solid relationships. I've not been portrayed as being pro-science by a lot of people, but let me tell you, there are some really good researchers out there, and the kind of stuff that we're seeing that has changed what we're doing. The two biggest innovations in crown-of-thorns control, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is Morgan Pratchett's work on single injection methodology and Dave's work on integrated pest management. That's where the two biggest innovations and step forward have occurred. The fast facts, and these figures are not just dating from 2012, these date from 2000. We've done more than 3,600 days at sea, 21,000 control dives, 10,000 reef health impact surveys, over 900,000 COTS culled, and we've trained over 200 occupational divers. And we've done that without any serious workplace health and safety issues. Nobody's had decompression illness, nobody's had an embolism. We have had a couple of issues. Working on boats that long, you're always going to have injuries with people falling over or breaking a bone here or there, but nothing that I would consider, essentially incredibly serious. And when you look at that as occupational diving, that's a very good safety record. The vessels we're using, MV Venus, just on 20 metres. MV Hero, again, you're just on 20 metres. These boats go out for 10 days at a time, typically taking a crew between 10 and 15 people each trip. They go out and so we've got a vessel leaving Cairns every Tuesday. One goes out and comes back the following Thursday week, and then the following Tuesday the next vessel rotates out. And we've been doing that kind of methodology now for since essentially 2012. And by going out and doing a 10-day voyage, obviously we're maximising the productivity and minimising the time spent travelling. And that time spent travelling as we deploy further and further to the south becomes somewhat critical. In fact, there'll be a stage where we will start doing some deployment out of Townsville. And the other little boat that we've been using for surveillance, this is just simply for doing manta towing, finding out what the actual current information is so we can feed that into both vessels. And we've got another surveillance boat that we're just about to put in the water. And the idea being that the people we are working with, the divers, know exactly where they have to pull up and where they're going to get the best bang for buck. Before we did the surveillance, you can picture the fact that we'd be dropping 10 people in the water to do a dive and there'd be nothing there. So we would have been told that there'd been crown-of-thorns there. We had lat long and we're told they're all there, so we dropped the divers in the water and there's nothing because the time lag between getting the surveillance information from the field management program to actually being able to dive it was too much, and so we needed to do our own surveillance. And in fact, the surveillance work certainly is one of the big aspects that came out of the integrated pest management, where we now have probably a 30% increase in productivity because we know where we're going and those divers are getting in and they're working on aggregations right up from the front. I've always looked at this as being a way of trying to troll up some tiger sharks. I can just imagine the people on the man aboard behind there acting as bait, but so far we've had no interventions like that. So what are the primary outcomes? The main two things that we were trying to do, and certainly protect key tourism sites and high value sites. And that's where this program came from. It wasn't until we went down the integrated pest management approach that we actually went to a scientific base. Prior to that, it was all about protecting the tourism sites, making sure that we had a continual tourism industry. And it's really exciting to see the fact now that we're tying it into the science, providing a lot of support there as well. So we had to undertake COTS control activities on priority reefs, reduce the COTS, collect robust coral health data, and provide advice and training on COTS control to marine park COTS control permittees. And that's in the main, up until now, that training and advice has been for the tourism industry. They're all essentially, if they've got on pontoon sites, they've also got crown-of-thorns permits, and we're the people that go out and train those people. The second main one was to improve tactical control and containment of COTS outbreaks on a broader scale by assisting the research into COTS, and we've done a lot of that over the last couple of years, trialling the integrated pest management methodology and providing all the COTS cull data and COTS sighting information back to the scientists. And from that is what's enabled David to come up with a revisitation, and those kind of aspects have all flowed from that information that we're putting out there. What it has also done is it's made us clean our data up. Quite often, our earlier data had a lot of errors in it, inadvertent errors where you're not using scientists, we're using divers to record this information, and you make a mistake on a lat long, nobody really cared. But boy, do we find out now when the scientists get it and start pulling their hair out. I think sometimes they'd like to pull mine out, but most of it's gone already. The introduction of bile salts was just a fantastic innovation, and to me it was beyond a shadow of a doubt the most significant step forward at the time that we had seen in COTS control in the history of COTS control. Picture the fact that we would have to have a diver over a coral staghorn garden had to reach in with a hook, pull the crown-of-thorns out without breaking the coral, pull it out, put it down on something flat, and then inject the bell of the crown-of-thorns 5 times, central, north, south, east, west, and then every single arm. It was on average taking about 6 minutes per crown-of-thorns. Now we don't have to pull it out, we can just simply reach in with and inject it in place, and it's gone from 6 minutes per crown-of-thorns to a couple of seconds. And so the productivity has been enormous. Before, if we had 1,000 crown-of-thorns in a week, we thought we're doing really well. Now we think we're doing pretty well if we've got 10 or 12,000. And we have had times where we've done 2 or 3 times that amount when we're just in a really big solid aggregation. When you look at the step from sodium bisulphate, there are still some people around the world using sodium bisulphate because they can't get oxbile. But the step forward, as I said, for productivity was enormous. The other one that is possible to use is essentially just household vinegar. You need a little bit more of it and you don't get the same mortality. Basically with bile salts, you've got 100% mortality within 24 hours. Training and education side of it, I've been fortunate enough to be able to tie a program called the Skilling Queenslanders for Work into crown-of-thorns control. And essentially that's really good because for the productivity of the crown-of-thorns control work, it means I've got labour that's provided by another funding source, which means that the program can again be more productive. But from a worker's point of view, we're taking essentially disadvantaged youth or Indigenous youth, and we're training them to be occupational divers. And we've had tremendous success with this program. To the point where we've trained about 230 young Queenslanders. We've had 85% full-time employment outcomes, and by the way, that would make it, of all the youth employment programs out there, makes this one that we're doing with crown-of-thorns the most effective employment program for youth in Australia, not just simply in Queensland, in Australia. Nobody else has managed to hit those particular figures. And they're not just staying in crown-of-thorns work or working in tourism area. They're branching out into all kinds of areas, and we're actually changing lives. There is no doubt about it through the Skilling Queenslanders program, and I'm really pleased to see the Indigenous involvement, and what that means is a steady income and a career path for these people. Absolutely vital. And yet, as I said, not just simply staying in the crown-of-thorns area. These people are all out doing different things, and from being policemen to joining the military to going back to uni and getting degrees. It's really breaking that unemployment cycle, which coincidentally Queensland called the program at one stage. It's been break the unemployment cycle. It's been Skilling Queenslanders for work. But it's getting people back out in the workplace. In a lot of cases, kids into the workplace that have never had jobs before. It's interesting when I look at my employees here in the front of the room and think that I've been doing crown-of-thorns for 20 years. Not too many of them were alive. We do a lot of support for science, and look, that's fairly obvious, and you'll see that throughout the day, so I won't go on any more on that because Dave's already given me the wind-up. So I'll say thank you very much.